places of love, meaning, communion, prayer, and faith. The concept I refer to is what is known in an anthropological way as the transparent home. Let me explain. I'm a child of the Ireland of the 1970s and the 1980s. I know I might look a little older, but that's as far as it goes. However, in those far-off days, there were two primary arbitrators between me and the world. They were called Mum and Dad. If they didn't like the behaviour I was engaged in, or the people I was hanging around with, they would appear at the door and I would be told, "Richard, in." And in I went, mumbling and grumbling along the way, but often somewhat relieved as well. Once in the house, they continued to be the guardians of reality. What do I mean by this? Well, there was one TV in the living room. We gathered as a family to watch it. If something unsuitable appeared, it was switched off, or we were sent out of the room or up to bed. I always found my father required a cup of tea just as things were really getting interesting in Dallas. As Marco said, there was no remote control, I was the remote control. There was one phone in the house, it was in the hall, and then in later years in the kitchen. And if we were on it, it was amazing how often Mum would need to drift through the kitchen, asking on her way, "Who are you talking to?" There were a few radios scattered around, but that was it really. Reading was actively encouraged, trips to the library were common. You see, the house, the walls of the house, they were opaque to the world. And so the house, the home, was thankfully a safe refuge from which to slowly venture into the world. It was a refuge to return to when things out there were overwhelming or even dangerous. We were gradually introduced to the outside world via parents, teachers, clergy, elders, at a pace that was slow, that allowed for social media that we have seen on both a national and international scale are open to manipulation from market forces and perhaps even more decidedly negative ones too. So what can we do? We who gather here at the call of our Holy Father and the World Meeting of Families in the midst of these sudden and sometimes dangerous changes. We cannot go back, nor would we want to, nor should we want to. We're well aware that the bucolic force of nostalgia only serves to isolate us further from the world. God is in the now. And so we must be in the now too. We must praise and promote the positive changes that have occurred too. Greater social connectivity and the possibilities for evangelization and outreach inherent in the new forms of media must be strengthened. They can become a ripe field for the harvest of the gospel. But there are skills that must be taught so as to manage these new ways of being. And I propose that, like the scribes of the kingdom spoken of by Jesus, who can bring forth things both old and new, we must enter into the depths of our own Christian contemplative tradition that has wonderful tools that can assist the young person, can assist the older person, and the family in their navigation of this changed world. The ancient practices of stillness, silence, reflection, the meditative forms of prayer that are at the heart of our Catholic tradition must be taught and must be lived again, not just in the monasteries, but in every single home. And there are wonderful programs out there to teach us how to do that. I think, for example, of the World Community of Christian Meditation or Contemplative Outreach, even the little spirituality centre that I worked in Dublin for so long, the Sanctuary. So many programs that invite people to breathe, to be, so that we can be still, because when we are still, as the Psalms teach us, we know the presence of God.
Years, if you walked into a town and you were looking for a church, you looked up and saw the spire. Today you look down and you get a deluge of information on the church, including reviews, etc. of the church you're looking for. Everybody is looking down. Go on a train journey, a bus journey, everybody is the phone out. Don't talk to anybody, look at the phone continually. The older generation, like myself maybe, we don't use it as much because we weren't brought up with it. Slight change there. The second thing I want to point out is that you're here today, you have taken pictures of yourselves at a world meeting of families, and you have sent it to all your friends around the world or wherever you're from, etc. But when you return home, nobody will want to see those pictures, because that's yesterday. The digital world is today, it's instant, it's now. We want it now. We want it delivered now. That's the digital world. And then we turn to prayer to God. And because of those expectations, are we expecting God to deliver now, God? Is God instant God? But the problem we have is like the phone. We have to be connected. How do we connect to God? And how do we listen? And the big thing today for me, and I should have said that most of my experience is giving pre-marriage courses, professionally trained pre-marriage courses to couples getting married, and my own experiences. And what we expect is instant. And I believe that God is communicating with us all the time, but we are not listening. We are not connecting. And how does God tell us things? God tells us things very simply through what we hear. Like what other people tell us, by our actions, by our prayers, etc. He's talking to us. I prayed for this.
On it today. Because you do not prove you are in love in a microwavable minute. You prove it in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. What's very interesting about marriage, and this will be kind of my semi-last statement here. Marriage and priesthood are very connected. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make it a little bit different here. I'm going to actually take the whipped cream. I'm going to pour it. You know how a lot of people put the whipped cream on top of the dessert? I'm going to put it as a little base instead. And chefs sometimes just like to do this, and they'll do like a smear like that, just to be fancy. That's fine. I don't care. Eat it any way you want. But we're just going to add a little bit of the cream right on the top, just like that. And then we're going to hit it with just a little bit of the panko. And you're going to see it's going to create a nice kind of beautiful texture. And some of you are going to get a chance to taste test this too. So just you wait. But let me tell you about marriage and the priesthood, because they're very similar. When I got ordained, I married the church, my bride. I had to give myself completely to her, which is why, have you ever been to an ordination? The priest lays on the floor as if he is going to die. And we are. And then we all wore white, a sign of our innocence. And have you ever been to Rome? Come with me on a pilgrimage, because we eat and drink everywhere. It's amazing. Come with me on a pilgrimage to Rome, right? I've got a few trips available. But if you ever go to Rome, you're going to see at the Vatican and even at your church, you're going to see the altar, and you're going to see 4 posts with a canopy, right? Have you ever seen that? You know what that's called? It's called the baldacchino. And you know what those 4 posts are supposed to represent? The wedding bed canopy. The wedding bed. Why? You know what the altar is? It's the wedding bed of the priest. It is where he gives himself completely to his bride, the church. And where the church gives herself completely to God the Father, represented in the fatherhood of the priesthood. And what happens when 2 people give themselves to each other in love? Life. You might not have a baby, but you will have life. And that is why the altar is a wedding bed. Can I encourage you, couples, to turn your bedroom bed into a type of an altar? It's a place where you're supposed to experience God's self-giving love. It's where you experience life come within you. It's a place for holiness, not embarrassment. My mom and dad, every Friday, number. So I thought he wanted to talk to his kid, so I gave him he gave me the telephone, I called the number and I handed it back to him and he says, no, you listen. You listen to the phone. And then he had a look on his face like, ah. And I thought, what kind of number am I calling here, right? So I listened, and the phone rang 5 times, and then an answering machine answered the phone. It was a woman's voice. This is Mrs. Giamari, no one can take your call, leave a message. And Mr. Giamari was sitting there, and he was crying. And he said, I bought an answering machine a few months ago, and I left a message, but my wife didn't like it. So she changed the message. And I am so glad she did, because I hear her voice. And I listen to her voice every day. That's love. So gentlemen, look at your spouse. Don't look at me, I'm not married, you people. Men, repeat after me. I state your name. Take you, state her name. To be my wife. I promise to be true to you. In good times and in bad. In sickness and in health. I will love you and honor you all the days of my life. And now women, wipe your eyes. And now repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Rena.
Take you, state his name.
Take you, Oliver.
To be my husband.
To be my husband.
I promise to be true to you.
I promise to be
in good times and in bad. In sickness and in health. I will love you and honor you all the days of my life. And now I'm going to bless your rings as a sign of God's love and fidelity in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And don't kiss each other yet.